What are some of the most compelling stories of interference with nuclear sites?
Yeah, so you have a bunch of stories. You have in 1964, there's a guy named Bob Jacobs who's a photo instrumentation specialist in the Air Force. He has over 100 people working for him. They're doing an Atlas dummy nuclear warhead test. This is at Vandenberg Air Force Base. He's down the coast, so he's 80 miles north of that at Big Sur, and he's basically using a telescope to look at this dummy nuclear warhead being ejected off of, an Atlas missile, and it's this test.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a routine sort of, telescoping of this object. He then gets called into Vandenberg Air Force Base, and his superior, this Major Florenz Mansman, calls him in, and they're watching video of what they caught, and they see the dummy nuclear warhead get ejected from the booster, and it's just floating in space, and you see a UFO wrap around, laser the dummy nuclear warhead and seem to deactivate it and wrap around it and continuously laser it until it tumbles out of the sky. And so Bob Jacobs freaks out and goes, "What is that?" And Mansman's trying to, come up with explanations. He's like, "I really don't know. This is really like concerning." And there are these two guys in gray tweed jackets in the back of the room, and they basically say to Bob Jacobs, "You are to never speak about this again. Here's an NDA. Sign it." They're, come from some nondescript agency. I think they were probably CIA, and that's that. And this is what's crazy. Bob Jacobs then blows the whistle on this and says, "This is actually what I saw. Like this was a UFO," and he gets harassed. Somebody calls his house and says, "It's a beautiful night, mailbox alight," or something, and they blow up his mailbox. He hears like heavy breathing on the phone. People are calling him with he's getting basically harassed around his testimony that this is real. He gets deleted from the government. So basically his records get deleted, and people are like, he never worked there. And then Mansman is kind of goes dark, like doesn't say anything until I think 1987. He's like a researcher at Stanford, and he comes out and he's like, "Actually, Bob Jacobs worked for me, and 100+ people worked for him." And so you had all this clear obfuscation, and then this vindication. I've seen Bob Jacobs' DD-214, which is your military records, and he definitely worked at Vandenberg Air Force Base. And now I don't think anybody sort of argues with that. So that's this crazy case. You have in 1967, actually 2 incidents at Echo Flight launch. You have these underground launch facilities at Echo Flight. So Malmstrom is this Air Force base with a bunch of Minutemen nuclear missiles. And you have a couple of different underground launch facilities, both at Echo Flight, one of the launch facilities, and Oscar Flight. Independently, you had 10 nuclear missiles go down. And that was concurrent to topside guards in both cases. One was March 18th of 1967. One was March 24th of 1967, seeing UFOs like hovering around the base. And then the nuclear missiles just go down. So it's this crazy thing. This guy, Bob Salas, who I interviewed on record, has talked about this a bunch. You have in the first case, in Echo Flight case, you had Strategic Air Command literally documenting like that they don't know why the missiles went down. Boeing was actually hired to investigate how 10 nuclear missiles could ever go down. Obviously, you would get like a third-party contractor to investigate this. And they were like, "This doesn't make any sense. There's no sort of like," we didn't even really have non-nuclear EMPs at the time. EMPs are electromagnetic pulses. They get created by nuclear blasts, but now there's like modern directed energy versions of these, which are like nukes without the nuke, kind of. It's spooky shit. And these weren't really even operational at the time, but they were looking into like mini versions of EMPs that you could create that might shut down 10 nuclear missiles. And they came out being like, "We have no idea what this is." And this guy, Robert Kaminsky, who worked for Boeing at the time, came out later in the 90s being like, "I think this was definitely a UFO." There's another guy, Bob Jameson, who was a targeting officer who was in charge of retargeting the missiles to get them back online. He's been on Larry King and talked about this. And he was like, "I have no idea, how this happened. This is totally unprecedented." And that he was actually briefed on this involving UFOs. It's pretty crazy. So you have those two cases. In 1977, Ellsworth Air Force Base, you have a guy named Mario Woods who claimed to. So this is really crazy. He woke up 9 miles away from Ellsworth Air Force Base after seeing a UFO, and his partner, this guy Michael Johnson, who also saw the UFO, was in a catatonic state, and he like never heard from the guy again. Or they met up once after that, but then this guy Michael Johnson like disappeared, and he got a hypnotic regression and claimed to have boarded a craft, and like gray beings, and then there's a tall gray being directing these small gray beings, and them implanting surgically certain things in his ankle where he has marks on his ankle and on his wrists, and he's shown the marks on my show. So you have all these cases, again, 167 cases. This is a really crazy one. Okay, so sorry, I could just go forever. In 2010, so Robert Hastings, this guy who wrote the book, UFOs and Nukes, has all these amazing sources of people who come to him with these cases. In 2010, you had a case at F.E. Warren nuclear site. This is in Wyoming, and you had a shutdown going on at F.E. Warren that The Atlantic reported on. The Atlantic said that it lasted about an hour, and that Obama was briefed, because you would get briefed if, one of your major nuclear sites went down. Totally lost power. Robert Hastings back-channeled with this retired missile technician, a guy named John Mills. John Mills said to him that it was actually 24 hours. It wasn't an hour. And John Mills had friends who were missile security on site, and they attribute this shutdown to a tic-tac shaped object flying around the base. And apparently these guys have sort of had trouble getting promoted in their careers, possibly due to this leak. Here's what's crazy. You look at that Atlantic article that talks about the shutdown, and it says there was a power failure at F.E. Warren. Power is crossed out, and then it goes engineering failure. And so they made it some sort. You look this up now. They made some mistake, and they allowed their live tracking or editing of the piece to be displayed. And there was this false cover story around how there was some engineering failure of a component that never fails or something. I don't remember the exact debunk on the component or something, but it was completely implausible. And so there was clearly this completely anomalous outage. Obama was briefed, and it was attributed by eyewitnesses who are Q-cleared guys to a tic-tac, flying around this thing. And you see the Atlantic live trying to cover their tracks.
Does this mean the Department of Energy is involved then?
The Department of Energy is definitely involved. They have to be involved.
Why them specifically?
Yeah, so the Manhattan, if you think about what the most locked down project prior to a possible UFO project would have been, it would have been the Manhattan Project. And so the Atomic Energy Commission, the most sensitive sites, in the U.S. I think Eric Weinstein even has a story. I'm blanking of the guy's name, but it's this guy from the Midwest, and he goes to Los Alamos, and he goes back, to Chicago or something, and he's like, there's a whole city in the Southwest, and it's all these scientists, and they're working on a thing. That's how locked down Los Alamos was at the time. Leslie Groves, who was in charge of security, was, Matt Damon plays him in Oppenheimer. You see how intense he is about Oppenheimer not, he couldn't schmooze with socialist spies. It was this really important thing. And there were all these kangaroo courts in the 50s around kind of loyalty tests among these top scientists. So if you really wanted to maintain control over a subject, I think the natural extension would be the Atomic Energy Commission. In fact, in 1947, the head of Air Material Command, so responsible for all aircraft development in the Air Force, is a guy named Nathan Twining. And he writes a memo called the Twining Memo. And he says, UFOs are not visionary or fictitious. And then in the postscript of the memo, he says, we actually might have some ideas as to how, and I'm paraphrasing, some ideas as to how these things fly. And we might undergo efforts to build some of these crafts. But if this were to ever occur, it would need to exist wholly independent of other projects. Basically, what he's saying is wholly independent of civilian bureaucracy moving in and out of government. So very little congressional oversight and probably tucked away in some of these compartments that guard our nuclear secrets. If you look at the 1954 Atomic Energy Act, which created the Department of Energy. If you look at the special definition of nuclear material in it, it's basically any material that is radioactive at all, emitting alpha, beta, gamma radiation, is born secret. It is classified upon retrieval. And so then you could use these aerospace corporations like Lockheed Martin or Northrop Grumman or any of these guys, and as soon as they retrieve a thing, it is classified under the NPQ, the line of clearances, not the TSSCI, not the like executive branch line of clearances, the DOE line of clearances. And so I think there are plenty of reasons to want to obfuscate this from the civilian government, from the executive branch, and want to put this in the Department of Energy.
A quick aside, you are probably not eating enough fruit and vegetables, and you know it. And this is going to help. Good news, AG1 just released their next-gen formula, and for the first time ever, they've also released flavors. Berry, citrus, tropical, and original. It's a more advanced and clinically backed version of the product that I've been drinking every single day for years. So you still get the same 1 scoop ritual, but now with an even more thoughtful formulation and 4 clinical trials behind it. AG1's been evolving since 2010. I think they've done 53 recipe upgrades since then, and their next gen version is the final result. It's clinically shown to help fill common nutrient gaps and support gut health, even in people who already eat well. In one study, it boosted healthy bacteria in the gut by 10 times. They've added more bioavailable nutrients, enhanced probiotics, and invested in real science, which is very rare in the supplement world. Plus, if you're still unsure, they've got a 90-day money-back guarantee, so you can buy it and try it for 3 months. If you don't like it, they'll just give you your money back, so you can do it completely risk-free. And if you sign up right now, you can get a year's free supply of vitamin D3K2, 5 free AG1 travel packs, and the 90-day money-back guarantee, plus international shipping by going to the link in the description below, or heading to drinkag1.com/modernwisdom. That's drinkag1.com/modernwisdom. Thank you very much for tuning in. If you enjoyed that clip, you will love the full-length episode available right here.